Welcome to the Miller Mindset, brought to you by BitLyft. This is where we discuss all things cybersecurity by cutting through the noise, sharing brutal truths, and leaving you with strategies to keep what you've built safe and strong. With me today, I've got a friend and colleague, Dave Cunningham. He is in beautiful California, and joining me on the recording today is he's coming in live from California, and it's great to have you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. So yes, I'm Dave Cunningham, and I'm with a firm, a ransomware recovery incident response firm called Alvaca, spelled Alvaka, and I've been working and helping clients recover from ransomware attacks over the last 5 years.
And it's very much needed today, wouldn't you say, Dave?
Absolutely. You know, we are seeing an increasing trend. It was maybe 5 years when we started getting into to helping firms recover from attacks. It was pretty prevalent, and what we've seen is a steady increase over the last 5 years.
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes hand in hand. I mean, at BitLyft, we do managed detection and response, share with clients the importance of log monitoring and having a SIM in place, being able to detect threats in seconds. And all of those are extremely important. But what we share with the public and in the marketplace inside of cybersecurity is that log monitoring and SIM and MDR is all right of boom. It's right of the incident happening. It's afterwards, right? And you often deal with a lot of things that are happening right of boom as well. And so what I'd like to talk with you a little bit about today is the readiness, the preparedness, and how to help folks out there in the space get prepared pre-incident, pre-boom, pre-having ransomware, so that people can protect themselves better. So why don't we just kind of start out with, why is ransomware readiness such a must, or what do you share with people that really emphasizes you need to be doing this now, this year, don't wait?
Yeah, so why is readiness important? Kind of what we share with folks. The one thing that's kind of ironic is that it seems that clients that are the most ready or that have the highest degree of readiness, it's ironic because the measures that they put in place actually prevent the ransomware attack from occurring and succeeding in the first place. So at a high level, having what is called an incident response plan, where you already have a plan in place as to how you are going to react and who you're going to bring in, what is your first 24, 48 hours going to look like, if there is an attack. And having that plan in place allows you to kind of prevent blunders that you might have, which we can get into, blunders to avoid. So that certainly is helpful. Having the security monitoring in place for capturing metrics and telemetry into a SIM, then that's super helpful to have. And this is one of those things that most clients do not already have in place. And I tend to really think in terms of, okay, what do we do to have ransomware readiness? But then what are the key measures that we need to have in place that are effective in preventing or blocking a ransomware attack?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, we share with clients as well that when you engage incident response firms like yourself and you start to do digital forensics, one of the things that we tell them, the first question that Dave Cunningham is going to ask from Alvaca is, do you have logs, right? Do you have any footprints of where this began? What are we dealing with? And what's the information that's taking place, right? I mean, you're in a discovery mode when somebody calls you and you're starting to get a handle on what's taking place. Am I correct in saying that?
That's correct. So When we get immediately engaged, we're asking information about the overall environment, trying to get a quick, assessment of the environment. So with an incident response plan, you have that information at your fingertips. And then we're asking for symptoms or kind of the sequence of events. And so that's what we do. And then we're asking clients to preserve evidence, preserve logs, make no changes while we're putting together a restoration plan.
Don't reboot anything. Don't make any changes. Just stop doing IT at that point and get on the phone with the experts.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's some things that can be done immediately. First of all, disconnecting from the internet in most cases is not a very controversial recommendation. Disconnecting from the internet and then powering down core switches to prevent systems from communicating with each other, but leaving the systems up and running are some of the first things that can be done in the, I would say within the first hour of discovering that we do have an attack. And then there's certain things not to do, which is communicating, to clients and staff, customers and staff, that there is a ransomware attack. We want to limit the information that's being conveyed, because once you make a statement, you can't pull it back. And of course, the breach, the attorneys advise as to that.
That's always a big one. I always err on the side when we are kind of communicating and even prepping clients is you never want to say anything that incriminates you, right? You don't want to say too much. It's best to just leave it at something that's a little bit vague and then ask for time. Like, let us get back with you. There's no harm, no foul in saying, like, listen, we don't know enough about what's going on yet. We need to do a little bit more research. We need to do a little bit more discovery. And then, we'll make an official statement soon. But I don't know if that aligns with what you're thinking there.
Yeah. So why do we advise folks to people try, in situations like this, there's a tendency to want to be as transparent as possible with customers and staff. So why do we recommend withholding that information? And the reason is because with a ransomware attack, there's potential legal liability on a number of fronts, and so we recovering from the ransomware event, getting back into business is an objective, but also minimizing the downstream risk and the legal liability is super important. A lot of times that can be actually more financially damaging than the actual event itself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So you've got to be careful what you say. Which leads me to my thought here. What are some common myths about ransomware? I think of people saying, "Oh, we're going to pay the ransom," or "We're not going to pay the ransom." What sort of helps people understand, like, getting back online faster?
Well, one of the myths is that so the common myths are people will have confidence that they have good backups. They think, well, if we get hit with a ransomware attack, we've got good backups, and they kind of stop there, thinking that that's going to give them a recovery path. The reason why that's a myth is because even with recoverable, viable backups, the recovery process is quite lengthy and painful, even when recovering from backups. So industry average from a recovery from a backup is 12 days. I think we do some things to kind of cut that down. So that's one myth. Another myth is folks they look at, they've been held hostage by a threat actor. They're going to negotiate and pay a ransom, and they may think that, number one, that's going to actually get them back faster, when in fact it gets them back. It does add a significant amount of time to the recovery process. The second thing that is or challenging to know is that when you purchase a decryption tool or a decryption key from a threat actor, it's not like taking a password and just entering it in to the systems and now you're back up and running. It's quite the devastating attack. So there's a whole decryption process that you have to go through. It's messy. It's time consuming. So there's really not an easy quick restoration path unless somebody has what are called immutable snapshots in their production storage, where that's really the fastest restoration.
I love that, Dave. You just touched on something that's near and dear to my heart: immutable backups. Let's just double click on that for a moment, because I think a lot of people. You're touching on something. I think a lot of people out there actually think I have backups. You mentioned this where I'm okay. If I get hit with ransomware, I have Veeam backups, or I have some backups that are in my SAN storage, or AWS is backing up, inside of their AWS services, and we've set up backups in AWS or Microsoft Azure Cloud. But I want to bring us to this immutable backups for just a quick moment. Can you talk about immutable backups and the importance that they would play inside of ransomware?
Yes, absolutely. So, immutability is why are immutable backups, or why is immutability important? And immutability means that the backups are virtually impossible to delete, whether it be by a threat actor, whether it be by accident, whether it be by a rogue insider. And so immutability means that it's virtually impossible to delete that data. Now, there's a couple of, as we peel the layer on this, one of the things is that people assume that because they have perhaps an expensive backup system that, you would think it would be immutable. But in the example of Veeam, it's not immutable by default. It has to be specifically implemented in a way to have that immutability. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that people will say, well, we have immutable backups in the cloud. The challenge is during a ransomware restoration, the time that it takes to recover from the cloud is very time consuming. So it's really important in a backup system like Veeam that you have local immutability. There's an appliance, or there's the ability to recover from the local backups, and the recovering from the cloud backups is kind of a Hail Mary, and we've seen a lot of clients where they just didn't have the time. They could not wait for the days or weeks to pull down on the cloud, off of the cloud. Now, the third thing that's super important from an immutability is we can distinguish between, do we have immutable backups, or do we actually have our production storage in a system? I'll just throw out a vendor's name. Pure Storage has a function capability to create immutable snapshots of production storage. So in those cases, those are the fastest restorations we see in less than a day, because they're not pulling down and doing a recovery from their backup systems. They're actually recovering in production from production. Those are very, those are really good outcomes, all things, compared.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this, we're not plugging any vendors because we sell them. We're simply giving you concepts and tips and tricks around what we've seen work really well. What Dave is also talking about there is if your backup is all out in the cloud and you don't have a local immutable backup of your production environment, you're going to be dependent upon throttling. You're going to be dependent upon your internet speed. You're going to be dependent upon all these other variables about getting your data back. So this is very important for you to think about and how you're going to recover your data. I think a lot of people think about, I've got backups. but that it doesn't just stop there, right, Dave? I mean, on that statement.
Absolutely. And of course, you can get into a whole discussion about just having backups not being sufficient. But very often, there's a rule of thumb that says that when you do a backup test or a recovery test, 100% of recovery tests fail on the first try. So that if your first test is the ransomware event, chances are you're going to have a bad outcome. So certainly having backups immutable that you have tested to do a full system recovery, not just recovering a single file as a test, but actually having done recovery tests of entire systems. That gets back into key things that organizations can do to have higher ransomware readiness, is to have tested those backups.
Yeah. We sort of jumped right into recovery, but let's take a step back for a moment. What I'd like to share with our listeners is, what are some of the top ways ransomware sneaks into the network, and how can those businesses stop it before it starts?
Well, so I was thinking about this. What are the top ways that ransomware attacks occur or are initiated at the very beginning? And say 4 or 5 years ago, 3 years ago, the most common entry method that a threat actor would use is a phishing email attack. So they send a malicious email to a user. The user clicks on a link. Malicious software is loaded to the workstation itself, and then that attack chain begins. So that was the most common, a few years ago. Then what we saw in the last couple of years is that threat actors started and were successful at attacking firewalls and VPN concentrators. So there's been a lot of VPN compromises. A lot of this came out of the, people working remotely after COVID. And so there were VPN compromises were more prevalent. And what's challenging about this is really not due to any user error on the part of a user. Now, I would say it's an error on the part of the IT staff for having vulnerable devices, but we didn't have a situation where a user clicks on an email and they made a mistake. These attacks happen, and everybody's surprised they can't figure out any particular action that anybody did wrong. So that's happened. And then we now have, in the last month or so, a much more common social engineering type of an approach, which we call email bombing. And so what'll happen is the threat actors they'll obtain a list of user email addresses. They'll subscribe all of these users to receive newsletters and marketing information, and get on the Sam's Club card, and all of a sudden, so the user comes to work on a Monday, and they've got thousands of emails in their email box, in their inbox, and their spam filter is choked full of all these emails. They can't even function, and they can't get to their emails. So then bad guys will impersonate the IT department. They'll call up, say, "Hey, I'm from the IT department. We're working on this email problem. You got a lot of emails there, so let us get in and try to clean this mess up." And the security awareness training that the users have don't even contemplate this scenario. They'll render support just like their IT department normally renders support, and from there they get in. So those are kind of the common methods for today.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I would agree with you. I've seen what I call these chunks of time or timeline ranges where we as well seen ransomware, proliferate, right? Like you said, through phishing emails and people clicking on things. And And then that was several years ago. I would almost say that was like pre-COVID, pre-2020. There was this methodology. Then you had, yes, the COVID timeframe, 2020, 2021, where it was, the VPNs and this sort of attacking because the structure of the way people worked changed. And now you have this new method, right? And we have seen it. The email bombing is real. And I even, we even are very careful about if we are getting emails from newsletters and organizations that we never signed up for before, we're quickly, changing our settings inside of Google Gmail and your email provider. I would highly recommend you change your thresholds so that these emails that you're getting are pushed over to your spam and not into your inbox. And then, yes, be very careful. If you have any suspicions at all about who's calling you and they say that they're from your IT department, ask some verifying and validating questions. Hey, do you know John or Jim or Susie over in the IT department as well? Oh, how's your kids doing, or how's their kids doing? And I just talked to them yesterday. Ask them some verifying questions to make sure that they are who they say they are before you go and start giving control of your computer to somebody that very well, it might not be inside your organization.
Yeah, and just to follow on with that is, people, they get either IT support from within their organization or from, say, a managed service provider, and so I just say be very wary of unsolicited tech support calls.
Yes.
So you receive a call, and so the managed service providers have methods for authentication where you can call them back, call the MSP back and reestablish a connection. All of that, because the reason why this is challenging is that people are receiving IT support all day long anyway. So we can't throw too much of a monkey wrench into the support flow. But certainly, if you have IT staff that you work with and you're familiar with, that's one thing. If you have a managed service provider, they have it's third party. Then they should have methods to where you can validate with them, hang up the phone, call them back directly, and reestablish the support session.
100%. I love that. Dave, I think back when I was out visiting you in California, you had shared a couple of horror stories with me. Can you maybe position those horror stories in a way that they could be educational for our listeners and anonymize it, obviously, but, give some details to where people can learn from those horror stories?
Yeah, I was thinking about, what are there's every single one of these ransomware recoveries. We've been involved in about 300 restorations at this point, and every one is a horror story in its own right.
It is.
But I'll give an example of a firm where they had very low ransomware readiness and how it kind of played out. So we had a situation where a gentleman had for 40 years had been building a professional services company, and it had grown over the years, and he'd worked 7 days a week for the whole time. And finally, he had gotten to a point where he had sold the company, and then he and his wife, it was a good outcome. They were at the airport, about to leave for Europe on to get really a vacation that they hadn't had in 40 years, and they were going to go on an annual trip to Europe. And he got the call in the airport that they had suffered a ransomware attack, and all systems were down, and he had to stop. And the thing that was very painful for him is that this ransomware attack, because of when it occurred, it really threatened to completely unwind the sale of his company.
Wow.
And he would have, it would have
Jeopardize his
unwound the deal.
retirement.
It would have done that. And frankly, had they not been able to recover, not only would they have lost the sale of the company, but the value of the company would have been close to zero as they tried to rebuild this pro services company. So that was extremely painful, obviously. And this is an example where, unfortunately, they did not have really any level of ransomware readiness. So they had the backups were not immutable. They did not have their security being managed or monitored. So it was a fairly, they were a soft target, very vulnerable. It just was very bad timing that he got hit. Now, the punchline on that is, fortunately, somehow, by the luck of God, a developer, their ERP consultant had pulled down a full copy of their ERP system onto a laptop that he had, and fortunately, we were able to recover the company from that laptop.
Wow.
So,
wow, that I would definitely say that was like an act of God.
That was, yeah, right. So it was just very, very fortunate. They didn't have the ability to. The ransom that was being demanded would not have been able to be paid. They didn't have the cash reserves. They did not have cyber liability insurance. And it was just an extremely unfortunate situation. But like I said, just by the grace of God, their ERP consultant had the whole company running on his lap, or had a copy that he had pulled down because he was going to do some troubleshooting.
Well, thank goodness for developers doing that from time to time, pulling down a backup of the ERP system. It's something. So in that situation, or I know you've got, any one of the 300 ransomware responses and recoveries that you guys have done, is there one prevention step that sort of like comes to the forefront of your mind, like people should be doing this,
Yes, yeah. So, and I would say, is there one single one I would say, if I could expand that, there's a few things that are extremely essential. We get overwhelmed sometimes in cybersecurity in that there's 30 different things that we're supposed to be doing. And we just need to understand that not all security measures are created equal. There's some that are way more impactful than others. And so our recommendation is to do those first. I'll just go in order. Certainly, having multi-factor authentication for all remote access is key, because the reason why multi-factor is so important is because it blocks an attack chain on multiple steps along the chain. It really gums up the work for a threat actor that's gotten into an environment or prevents them from getting in the first place, and then successfully executing on their attack chain. So multi-factor authentication for all remote access of all applications, not just email, and also multi-factor authentication for all privileged access. So if a system administrator sits down at a keyboard and he's going to log into the server that he's sitting in front of, he should still get an MFA challenge.
100%.
That's absolutely key. The second preventative method is the security monitoring, 24/7 monitoring, because we can put in place all the layers that we can to prevent an attack, but without nothing is perfect. It does not make the environment impermeable. And so assuming that the threat actor can get in one way or another, having security monitoring in place such that the attack is detected and blocked. They initially got in, but then the attack can be blocked before the real damage is done, before data is stolen, before encryption is run. And it's absolutely possible to do that. As you know, Jason, this is your world. And unfortunately, some folks, they want to get their house in order first, and then they're going to do the monitoring later. It's kind of like, I'm going to clean my house first before I invite the maid. Having that security monitoring in the environment right away, as imperfect as the environment may be, that's key. And then to keep it going, over time. Those are the two things that I'd say are most important.
Well, I definitely agree with you. We tell people put MFA on everything, 100%, as best as you possibly can. Now, we get some pushback sometimes from like service accounts and things like that. But we still highly recommend that multiple like ways of having multi-factor authentication put on every single account that has access, especially admin accounts. And the other thing that I was thinking while you were discussing that is that you have to have monitoring in place. I think about so much today. We love home monitoring. We love these systems. There's lots of systems today where you can have home monitoring outside your house, inside your house, but yet that home monitoring is still either phoning the police or it's doing something that's reactive that probably is not going to prevent the damage because it's not electronic, right? It's not a immediate response. In the world that we live in today's modern approach to this, with something like a modern MDR, XDR, EDR tools on systems where we can monitor in real time and we can respond in real time, most of the time threat actors have a compromised account in their control for like seconds or maybe minutes. But in that time frame, you can at least prevent data exfiltration. You can prevent full-on ransomware. You can prevent their ability to use their automation on their side to get into your network fast. That is available today. And I agree with you. We see a lot of people sort of rolling the dice and not putting the proper monitoring, management, detection methodologies in place.
Well, yeah, and if I, Jason, if I could drill down on that in terms of, we use a word, monitoring, what does that mean? And you can think, well, we load technology onto a system and then it's monitored by some cloud service and all of that. And what we see time and time again is that the essential element is missing. And the essential element of MDR is the R part, the response. So oftentimes an IT department, they'll purchase an endpoint detection response tool. They'll actually, set themselves to receive the alert. The alert comes in at 3 a.m. and they're just not able to effectively respond. Plus, they start getting alert fatigue. There's a lot of false positives and such, so they start ignoring alerts, right?
Or they turn the alert off. We've seen that. Right.
Yeah, so having as part of the monitoring component, and this is conservative, except for the very largest enterprises that actually have a SecOps team, to have the EDR and to have the security monitoring performed by a third party that's able to respond in the middle of the night, within an SLA under an hour. To block an attack, because if it's properly set up, then an attack can be affirmatively blocked in progress. And those are we love to see those, because there's not that much damage done. There's not a restoration that needs to be, there's a little bit of a cleanup to figure out, okay, how did they get in, and let's prevent that from happening. But the damage, we've essentially not detonated the bomb.
Correct. Yeah, my sentiments there are very similar. We share with clients, like, is your plate already full? Are you already totally consumed with inside of your 40-hour plus or minus work week? How are you now going to put proper monitoring? And by the way, you need to live and breathe in the monitoring space. which means that you need to be doing threat hunting. You need to be validating hashes. You need to be doing all of the stuff that is still a manual task from a security analyst, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 perspective, that software and AI and automation quite hasn't solved yet. We've looked at almost all of the AI that is out there. I'm sure there's new stuff that we haven't quite seen yet. So I'll leave that as a caveat. But we don't see AI necessarily solving 100% the response problem. It will sort of bubble up that Susie or Johnny or Tim, did something, and this was the first time that they did it. And maybe they even logged in from a new location and bubble that up. But oftentimes you have to still disseminate. A human has to disseminate the difference between that person's legitimately that person and they're logging in from the first time from that new location. And they're on a work trip or they're on vacation or what have you, and they're being asked to do a task. And then for the system to help disseminate that information. It's always, we bubble up so much, and oftentimes what we think is a legit problem comes to find out that nope, this is real. But then so you can't get numb, right? Or you can't get fatigued and then start turning those things off or reduce them, because it's the one time. The criminal has to just be right the one time. And I think you and I have even talked about that before. It's just, they just have to be right once, right? And then they get into your environment.
Absolutely. Well, there's ongoing automated attacks going on. So I think what's really key is understanding that this is an attack in progress and being able to respond effectively on that. Jason, I'm kind of getting into your world in terms of all the ways to do that. But we're seeing that. We have clients. They're not restoration clients. They've never been hit, and I think I take a look at the steps that they're taking, and I would be amazed if they ever were victimized, because it's not a hopeless problem. It's not futility. It is a realizable fantasy to avoid, to avoid these attacks. And frankly, we have whole industries that are somewhat not immune from attacks, but you don't really hear them getting attacked. And that is the regulated industries where security is mandated. Now, the one exception is healthcare, and there's reasons for that. But generally speaking, the regulated industries have mandated security measures, which includes, ongoing monitoring. And we don't see those guys in the news. It's the distributors, the manufacturers, pro services, law firms, school districts, state, local government are the environments that are getting hit.
The supply chain. When you were talking, it's what came to my mind is the supply chain, right? And you're 100% right. The big companies, you don't see their name in the news and the headlines too much, because they are paying for all of the tools in the SecOps teams, in the 24/7 monitoring, and they have MFA, they have EDR, they have MDR, they have, right? And so a criminal actor is going to have a little bit tougher of a time cracking that shell, versus if you think about it, the easiest path between point A and point B for a criminal is to go after a lesser secured company. Like you're talking about, the supply chain, the organizations that are 50 employees or 100 employees or a couple hundred employees that haven't prioritized cybersecurity. There's nothing that's forcing them to do it, other than their own internal conversations and conviction. And, it sort of leans into, you sort of kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I'm almost wondering, like, What does the recovery for those organizations that are smaller, right, that are in the supply chain or they're in there, you know, how does their recovery look like after an event?
Yeah, so after an event, how are we going to recover an organization? The first step is there's a team engaged. Whether a client has cyber liability insurance or not, there's a fairly standard playbook. And now a cyber liability insurance company, they've had so many insureds that have been hit. They've kind of come up with a conservative methodology that they insist upon, which it reduces the risk during the event. It results in a fast. It's a conservative playbook, but then it also reduces the risk of downstream liability. It's all about the roles. Who is the right team, and what are the roles? And I'll just real quickly. There's a team. The most important role, ironically, is data privacy attorney or breach counsel, because breach counsel are coming in. They act as the case leadership, and they wrap the whole event under the attorney-client privilege. So that's super important. Then you have a forensics investigator figure out how did the bad guys get in? What data did they steal? What damage have they done? How did the attack occur? And then are they affirmatively ejected from the case or from the environment? Then another role is the threat actor negotiator. And even if a firm decides that, hey, we've got recoverable backups, we decided we're not going to pay and negotiate with a criminal, there still is the role of the negotiator to engage in a dialogue and to stall the threat actor. If the threat actor thinks that he's possibly going to get paid at the end of this, then he's less motivated to be attacked. Or to reattack, and that's a huge risk. They got in first time. Getting in was easy, was hard. Getting in the second time is pretty easy, and there's quite the risk of a reattack.
The lay of the land at that point.
At that, right? They know the environment sometimes better than the internal IT department at this point, right? So then you have that negotiator, and then if it turns out a ransom must be paid, then there's a negotiation back and forth to get a discount on the ransom. And then our role is the fingers on keyboard engineering support to do two main things. One is to restore systems as fast as possible, and at the same time to put in place some basic security measures to eject the threat actor and to prevent that reattack. So that's at a high level, how the process runs, and ideally all of these roles are engaged at about the same time.
Yeah. And so I want to point out throughout there, you were giving businesses some ways to be prepared for bouncing back, right? And, first of all, it starts out with a plan even before it happens. It can be a quick roundtable discussion. Most organizations don't take the time to do this. Heavily regulated organizations do. I would highly recommend, if you're a business, doesn't matter what size business you are, you take the time to do a 4-hour or a several hour tabletop exercise to discuss, if we are hit with a cyber attack, what are we going to do? And Dave, I think that you guys even help with some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if just down to the basics of just identifying in advance, if you are hit with an attack, who are you going to call? Identify that breach counsel, identify the investigator. We had a situation where client was hit at 2 a.m. and we were in their firewall at 3 a.m. actually doing work. Well, the reason why we were so fast is they'd already pre-negotiated. They had interviewed us. They knew that we were the ones they were going to call. We had a master service agreement in place. And so it was just a matter of picking up the phone, calling into a 24-hour hotline, identifying that they had this attack. And sure enough, it was a full-blown attack. And so we were in there within an hour. So that's an example where having an IR plan is really important.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that's important that I want to highlight for people that are listening to this is knowing what your cybersecurity policy, your insurance policy does state and what it doesn't state. And get some examples of cyber insurance, liability, and the policy. Get some examples of what should be there, what is in your policy that you are getting and what you're paying for and what's not. You need to know that before an event takes place. We see people kind of cracking open and reading that policy for the first time while they're experiencing a ransomware event. And they're trying to figure it out. That's the wrong time. You're already too late. And I'm just trying to make sure that you're thinking ahead of this problem, right?
Yeah. So as far as knowing your cyber insurance plan, certainly your insurance agent or broker can assist with that. In many cases, there's a whole process, a process for opening a claim, knowing what that is helpful. They may already have specified certain firms that are on their insurance panel, so you can interview those firms in advance. A lot of cases, it's really a client's choice as to who they're going to use to help them. But having those professionals queued up and on deck, essentially, and knowing who you're going to call helps. But in the case of an insurance policy, very often there's a claims number, you call in, that's your first call, and then that kicks off the whole process. It's helpful to have that printed out in a paper document rather than on the system where it's encrypted. So that's part of the IR plan, is having a hard copy of that plan.
100%. You want to state the obvious. Stating the obvious here is extremely important. Having physical copies of your IR plan, who you're going to call, when you're going to call them, what the priority is. Because if you think about it, if the environment is encrypted and you cannot access things, you have to assume that you won't have access to your email. You won't have access to the documents that you have now saved in a drive, all of those things. So you have to make sure that you're okay. Dave, when you think about the risks of botching the recovery, right? When you explain to people, hey, we have to be very careful about how we're going to do recovery. Can you maybe kind of go over that, for people that decide not to pay the ransom?
Absolutely. I was thinking about, how do you botch a recovery? What are the blunders that we need to occur? That we need to avoid. And I'm just trying to think of ones that I've seen happen on multiple occasions, because there's random blunders, that happen, but the ones that are really devastating that we need to avoid. So the first blunder is to assume, is to start to try to back up. We assume that our backups are viable. So it's like, okay, we need to recover from our backups. We don't have sufficient space on our systems, so we're going to recover from the backup. So the first thing we're going to do is, the blunder is to then delete the encrypted data, thinking, well, we need the space. We're going to recover from the backups. I don't need this encrypted data. They then delete the data, and then sure enough, they go to recover, then that's when they find out their backups are not viable. Well, if we've deleted the data, then we can't recover from backups, and we cannot negotiate and purchase a decryption key. So that is a major blunder, and can leave an organization where they literally have no recovery path. So that's blunder number one. Blunder number two is the inverse of that blunder, where organizations, they look at their backups, they feel like, okay, there's no recovery path. Our backups are not viable. So then they communicate with the threat actor, and they do a fast pay on purchasing a decryption key, which may be in the seven figures, only to find out that, and I had a client where we, after they had done that, I didn't even know that they were, reaching out to that they were going to make a payment. We found we were able to salvage the backups and recover them much faster than had we had to decrypt. And I was surprised that they were not happy at that news. Well, the answer was because they had prematurely paid for a decryption key that they did not need. Even though the backups appear to be compromised, all is not lost until you get somebody with a fresh pair of eyes into the environment to figure out if there is any way to recover.
Communication there is so key, isn't it?
Oh yeah. And then the third blunder, and I've seen this is very common actually, and we've seen a number of these scenarios, which is an organization, their heads down. They know they want to get their systems back in business, so they go through a restoration effort where they're working their IT staff around the clock for a week without sleep, and to recover, only to come in the following Monday, everything is re-encrypted because they re-attacked. And the blunder is doing a restoration without actually ejecting the bad guys, without doing what we call containment. Yep. So that third one is the one that we see most common, and reattacks are prevalent in the industry. I think the chances of being reattacked if there's no there's no containment is way over 50%.
Yes, I have seen numbers. I've seen actually 61%. I've seen 67% listed for reattacks, and like you said, it's quick. Because the threat actor sees that the environment is back up, it's accessible, and it's online, and it is in relatively the same state that they seen it when they attacked the first time. So they attack again, oftentimes even worse, right, than the first time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Where we see that, so they recovered, they were watching what was going on the whole time. And so then when they reattacked the second time, they got the backups the second time. It's like, that's how because they had keyloggers, and they figured out how they were able to get access to the backup system.
Yeah. Yeah. I oftentimes, and then there's like this fourth one that I often share with folks. And you may agree with this, Dave, but it's in the order in which we should restore, the order in which things need to happen. I think you touched on, which is very important. They need to be communicating and talking to the experts, the customer, the people that are ransomed. You guys might not be dealing with this like every day, like Dave is. Dave is dealing within the ransomware restoration process on a daily basis. So he's a subject matter expert. He's got the do's and the don'ts, right? Communication is high on that priority list of do, and then establishing a priority list of things that we need to do and a priority list of things that we probably don't need to do. But you have to have a conversation about it. If you're off making, trying to negotiate payment in the background, and Dave's team is over trying to look at the data and potentially recovering you. Oh yeah. If you're like, oh yeah, we just paid that $1.5 million, ransomware demand. And then Dave comes and calls, 60 minutes later and says, hey, we found out a way that we can restore your data. You're like, I already paid the people.
Right.
It's
Well, a strong breach counsel. So this is a kind of a solved problem, because what the experienced breach counsel and the firms like ours will do is there's multiple cadence calls. So typically in the beginning of the call, or I mean in the beginning of the case, there may be twice. We're working around the clock, and then we're checking in the morning on a cadence call, and then at the end of the day, and that really gets all the players synced up. And this is something that the breach counsel will establish, or we will establish it. But that communication is set up. So that's first thing. The second thing is understanding that at least during the restoration and the prioritization, what do we do first? I always kind of joke that we're breaking all the rules of IT. This is not your normal IT project. And some of the steps that we're doing and the things that we do it in what order is a bit counterintuitive. It's not the way that you would do a normal IT integration project.
Yeah.
And so I kind of look at it like we're a bit like battlefield medics. The results will be effective. It may not be pretty. Then there's time after the case to get everything buttoned up.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, and love to hear that, Dave. It's I think it's very important for people to sort of hear that, understand it, and then take it into consideration as they're making their decisions. One of the things that you were kind of touching on there, and I'd like to maybe just ask you about here is like, as Alvanka's done ransomware battles, you sound like you've got a bunch of them. 300 plus, that you can remember. What separates the survivors from the casualties? Yeah,
that's a great question. What are their survivors from the casualties? So, I kind of take a look at it, it's kind of like if you're a pilot, how do we measure success when we're landing an airplane, which is any landing you can walk away from is a successful landing, right? And
us as pilots do say that, yes.
Yeah. So success is on a continuum, from disaster to ideal. And we want to make sure we're closest to the ideal outcome as possible. So the ideal outcome is systems are back up and restored. There's been no material loss of revenue. There's been, we haven't lost clients, they haven't lost customers, whatever. The revenue wasn't impacted because they were able to essentially defer invoicing, but then get caught up at the end. And so they get out at the end of it, and they've not been damaged from a brand and future business perspective, and they're not getting sued. There's no lawsuit, class action lawsuit as a result due to the exfiltration. That is the ideal outcome. The worst outcome is client goes out of business and they get sued. That's the worst. We fortunately, and I should not say this here, we've not had a situation where the client purchased a decryption key from a threat actor, and we were not able to make it work. Now, the threat actors, they're motivated to give you a functioning decryptor because they have a reputation to maintain. If they people would not pay the ransom if you had a particular threat actor that was known that you pay the ransom, but you still can't come back, right?
So it's always fascinating to me that criminals have some sort of ethics or morals around that part, right?
Yeah, and it's the way I look at it is it's really not like honor among thieves, but it's a business, and they have to have credibility. People, it's just black and white. If you had if it became known that, let's say, a threat actor like Akira, that they were taking ransoms and then people still couldn't recover, then nobody would pay those ransoms anymore. Yeah. The second thing that's interesting is that we talk about criminals. It's it is not against the law in Russia to engage in a ransomware attack against a U.S. business. So I take a look at, these are technically really not criminals. They're more like mercenaries. Mm-hmm. They are motivated to follow through and have people pay a ransom and then have the outcome that they're looking for sure.
Yep.
And but fortunately, we've not had so we've had a few firms that, had a successful recovery, but due to the business impact, a year later, we find that they do declare bankruptcy or they go out of business as a result of just the disruption that occurred, or union went on strike in the middle of it, that kind of thing. So those are the business impacts that are devastating.
Well, I think in working towards wrapping it up, I think you said a few things there that are extremely important that I would want the listeners to walk away from. One is, as you just mentioned, this is a business for these. We here in the United States think about this as criminal activity. But you're 100% right. They need to have some sort of honor among thieves that they are going to give you a decryption key if you pay them, because they want to make sure that people pay them. And it is a business over in other countries. And so I think people understanding that it is legitimate business on their part, the criminal actor's part. Now, it might not be to us here in the United States, because we're the victim and we don't think that this is right. But I do think that that's important to walk away from. And it emphasizes that you need security, you need cybersecurity, and you need to know what you're going to do and how you're going to do it when the time comes. To potentially protect yourself from a ransomware. Dave, can you maybe share with our listeners where they could find you and how they might be able to get a hold of you in such the case that they do need to chat with you?
Yeah, appreciate it. So the firm is Alvaca. The website is alvaca.net. So it's Alvaca spelled ALVAKA.net. Folks can go to our website. They can send an email to restore@alvaca.net. And we have a 24-hour. You hit our website and you'll get the 24-hour number, but I can read it out, which is 949-428-5001. Awesome. And we're there 24/7, and so we can activate very quickly.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you, Dave, being on today and sharing with our listeners, the steps that we went over today. Man, I'd love to have you back sometime in the near future so that we can deep dive into more topics. There's a lot that we didn't get to cover today, but I wish you all the best and have an awesome day out in California.
Thank you, Jason.